You're sitting there right now, comfortable, scrolling through videos, thinking you've got a handle on preparedness because you bought some extra canned goods and watched a few survival videos. Maybe you've even got a bug-out bag in your closet. But let me ask you something that's going to make you deeply uncomfortable. Do you actually know what you're preparing for? Because here's what I know with absolute certainty. 99% of people who think they're preppers are preparing for the wrong scenarios, in the wrong ways, with completely unrealistic expectations about their actual readiness level. They've been programmed by every disaster movie to imagine themselves as the hero who figures it out, who adapts, who survives through grit and determination. The reality? Most of them will be dead or compromised within the first 2 weeks of any major collapse scenario, not because they're weak, but because they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the threat. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 8 most realistic ways modern civilization actually collapses, not Hollywood fantasy, not zombie apocalypse nonsense. The real physics, the real logistics, the real cascading failures that turn your comfortable life into a desperate struggle for basics you currently take for granted. And more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly why your current level of preparation is almost certainly inadequate for even one of these scenarios, let alone the combinations that are most likely to actually occur. Forget The Walking Dead. Forget Mad Max. Here's what the end of the world as you know it actually looks like, and here's your honest assessment of whether you'd make it past month 1. You can keep scrolling and maintain your comfortable illusions, or you can spend the next 22 minutes getting a reality check that might actually save your life. Your choice. Let's get tactical. If you want to be part of the 1% who actually understand what they're facing, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with which collapse scenario keeps you up at night. Because after today, you're going to have a very different answer to that question. Let's start with the scenario that most preppers completely misunderstand: electromagnetic pulse and grid collapse. You've heard about EMP attacks, solar flares, cyber attacks on infrastructure. Here's what nobody tells you about what happens when the grid goes down and stays down. It's not just your lights going out. Let me paint you a picture of the first 72 hours. Every gas station in your area becomes instantly inaccessible because the pumps are electric. The gas is still in the underground tanks, millions of gallons of it, but without power, it's just sitting there, useless. The grocery stores? Their supply chain collapsed the moment their inventory management systems went dark. The food in the stores right now represents about 3 days of normal consumption for your local population. But here's the kicker that separates the informed from the delusional. Water stops flowing within hours. Your municipal water system requires constant electrical pumping to maintain pressure. No power means no pressure means no water from your taps, even if the treatment facility somehow stayed operational. Run the numbers with me. Average person needs 2 liters of water per day minimum. Family of 4 needs 8 liters daily. How many days can you go with what you have stored right now? And I don't mean rationing down to dangerous dehydration levels. I mean actual survival hydration. Most people have maybe 3 to 5 days of drinking water if they're lucky. After that, they're looking at rivers, streams, ponds, or the water heater tank they forgot they could access. But here's the physics they don't teach you. Moving water and filtering water are 2 completely different problems. You need a way to actually transport water from the source to your location. That's weight. 8 liters is 8 kilograms, about 17 pounds. How far can you carry 17 pounds of water? How many trips? From where? And everyone else in your area just figured out the same math problem at the same time. Now let's talk about the second scenario, and this one's fresh in everyone's mind but poorly understood. Pandemic collapse. COVID-19 was the dress rehearsal. The actual pandemic that breaks civilization isn't the one with a 2% fatality rate. It's the one with a 20 to 30% fatality rate and a 2 to 3 day incubation period before symptoms. Here's what that looks like in practical terms. Every essential service loses a quarter to a third of its workforce within 2 weeks, not just from deaths, but from people too sick to work, people quarantining, people staying home to care for family, people who simply refuse to show up because the risk isn't worth the paycheck. Who keeps the power plants running? Who drives the trucks that deliver food? Who maintains the water treatment facilities? The answer is nobody, once the infection rate crosses a certain threshold. And here's the secret that separates survivors from casualties in this scenario. Pandemic collapse isn't about avoiding infection. Unless you have a fully isolated facility with its own air filtration and months of supplies, you're going to be exposed. The question is whether you have the medical supplies and knowledge to treat secondary infections, manage symptoms, and maintain basic health when hospitals are overwhelmed or simply closed. Pop quiz. Do you have oral rehydration salts? Do you know how to make them from scratch with salt, sugar, and clean water? Do you have broad-spectrum antibiotics stored at proper temperature? Do you know which antibiotics treat which infections? Most people don't. They have Band-Aids and ibuprofen, and they think that's a medical kit. Third scenario, economic and currency collapse. This is the one that sneaks up on civilizations because it looks like politics and policy until suddenly it's empty shelves and worthless paper. Let me teach you something they don't cover in high school economics. Money only works when everyone agrees it works. The moment confidence breaks, the system breaks. And confidence breaks fast when people realize their savings can't buy bread. The trigger can be hyperinflation, bank failures, digital currency hacks, or sovereign debt default. The result is always the same. Transactions freeze, supply chains collapse, and suddenly the only currency that matters is barter and tangible goods. Here's your reality check. What do you own right now that has actual trade value in a collapsed economy? Not sentimental value, not what you paid for it. What could you trade to someone who needs tools, food, water, security, or skills? The preppers who make it through economic collapse aren't the ones with gold coins buried in the backyard. They're the ones with skill sets that remain valuable regardless of currency. They're the ones with stockpiles of items that people desperately need and can't manufacture themselves. They're the ones who understood that in a barter economy, a bottle of antibiotics is worth more than a gold bar because you can't cure an infection by holding precious metal. Fourth scenario, and this is the one currently unfolding in slow motion, supply chain breakdown. Not from a single catastrophic event, but from cascading small failures that compound until the whole system seizes. Modern civilization runs on just-in-time delivery. Your grocery store has 3 days of food. The pharmacy has 2 weeks of medication. The gas station gets refilled every 36 to 48 hours. Everything is optimized for efficiency, which means there's zero redundancy, zero buffer, zero resilience. Break one link in that chain, and the whole system starts failing. Trucker strike, port closure, railroad disruption, fuel shortage, cyber attack on logistics software. Take your pick. The preppers who survived this aren't the ones who stockpiled everything. That's impossible. They're the ones who identified critical dependencies and built redundancy specifically for those items. Medication, water filtration, calories, heat, defense. Everything else is negotiable. Here's your reconnaissance task for this scenario. Map every item you consume regularly that you cannot produce or substitute locally. Prescription medications. Specific tools. Fuel. Now calculate how long your current stockpile lasts. If the answer is less than 90 days, you're not prepared for supply chain collapse. You're just slightly better off than your neighbors for the first month. Fifth scenario. Limited nuclear exchange. Not global thermonuclear war. Not mutually assured destruction. A regional conflict that goes nuclear or a single terrorist device in a major city. The blast zone is obvious. If you're within the radius, you're done. But here's what most people completely miss. The secondary effects kill far more people than the initial detonation. Electromagnetic pulse takes out electronics in a massive radius. Radiation fallout spreads based on wind patterns. Panic and evacuation overwhelm infrastructure. Supply chains collapse as ports and distribution hubs shut down. But the real killer is the panic response. Millions of people trying to evacuate simultaneously. No fuel available, no food available, no plan beyond get away from here. They end up stranded on highways, in temporary shelters without supplies, or attempting to walk to destinations hundreds of miles away without proper gear or knowledge. The survivors of nuclear scenarios are the ones who either stayed in hardened shelters with supplies for weeks or had pre-planned evacuation routes to prepared fallback locations. Not, I'll figure it out when it happens. Not, I'll just drive to my cousin's place upstate. Detailed routes, cached supplies, communication protocols. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're in a major metropolitan area when a nuclear device detonates, your survival odds are almost entirely based on decisions you make in the first 4 hours. Shelter immediately or evacuate immediately. There's no middle ground. There's no wait and see. Sixth scenario, climate cascade failure. Not gradual warming, not slow sea level rise. Sudden systemic collapse of weather patterns causing simultaneous crop failures across multiple breadbasket regions. Here's the reality of global food supply. There is no surplus. Every bushel of grain is already allocated, already purchased, already accounted for in someone's diet somewhere. When major producing regions fail simultaneously, which is increasingly likely as weather patterns destabilize, there is no strategic reserve to draw from. The physics are simple. Calories go from abundant to scarce in one growing season. Prices spike. Governments ban exports. Hoarding begins. Riots follow. Your preparation for this scenario comes down to one question. Can you produce calories independent of the commercial food system? Not supplement your diet with a garden. Produce actual survival calories. 1 pound of grain is roughly 1,500 calories. Adult male needs 2,500 calories per day. Do the math for your household for 1 year. Most people have zero ability to produce meaningful calories. They have decorative gardens. They have herb planters. They do not have the land, the skills, the equipment, or the seed stock to feed themselves if commercial food disappears. Seventh scenario, coordinated cyber warfare and infrastructure attacks. Not ransomware, not data breaches. Simultaneous attacks on power grids, water treatment, financial systems, and communications designed to create maximum chaos and cascade failures. The attackers don't need to destroy infrastructure. They just need to compromise control systems long enough for things to break themselves. Power plants that can't regulate output. Water treatment that can't maintain chemical balance. Traffic systems that create gridlock. And here's the exponential problem. Every modern infrastructure system depends on every other system. Water treatment needs power. Power plants need water for cooling. Both need communications for coordination. Financial systems need power and communications. Supply chains need all of them. Break 3 simultaneously, and you get cascading collapse faster than any single point failure. And the restoration timeline isn't days. It's weeks to months because the expertise to fix these systems is specialized, dispersed, and can't physically reach all the failure points simultaneously when transportation and communication are compromised. Your preparation for this is the same as grid collapse with one addition. Assume you cannot trust any electronic systems or communications for the duration. No internet, no cell phones, no GPS, no electronic banking. How do you coordinate with your network? How do you verify information? How do you avoid misinformation and manipulation designed to create additional chaos? Eighth scenario, and this is the one that makes everyone uncomfortable because it's not external threat. It's internal fracture, societal breakdown, and widespread civil conflict. Not revolution. Not civil war with clear sides. Sustained low-intensity conflict, ethnic tensions, political violence, economic desperation, and collapse of rule of law, creating a patchwork of dangerous zones and fortified enclaves. This is the scenario where the government still exists, but can't project authority everywhere, where police still operate but can't respond to most calls, where some areas remain relatively stable while others descend into warlordism and gang control. The preppers who survive this aren't the lone wolves. They're the ones who built trusted networks before it became necessary. They're the ones who established their value to a community that can provide mutual defense and resource sharing. They're the ones who understood that individual survival in sustained civil conflict is nearly impossible, but small group survival with clear protocols and overlapping skills is achievable. Here's your reconnaissance for this scenario. Who in your immediate area has complementary skills to yours? Who do you trust in a crisis? Who would you defend, and who would defend you? If the answer is nobody or I don't know my neighbors, you're not prepared for societal breakdown. You're prepared to become a target or a casualty. And here's the exponentially worse reality. These scenarios don't happen in isolation. They compound. Pandemic stress leads to economic collapse. Economic collapse leads to supply chain failure. Supply chain failure leads to societal breakdown. Climate cascade triggers resource conflicts. Nuclear exchange follows regional war. Cyber attack happens during political crisis. The collapse you should actually be preparing for isn't one clean scenario. It's 3 or 4 happening simultaneously or in rapid succession, each one making the next one worse, each one eliminating options you thought you had. So here's your actual readiness assessment, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself right now. For each of those 8 scenarios, ask yourself, do I have the supplies? Do I have the skills? Do I have the network? Do I have the fallback plan? If you answered no to even one element of even one scenario, you're not prepared. You're hopeful. And hope is not a survival strategy. The dark truth that nobody wants to acknowledge is this: perfect preparation is impossible. You cannot stockpile for every scenario. You cannot master every skill. You cannot defend against every threat. Eventually, luck matters. Eventually, you're making impossible choices between bad options. Eventually, you have to decide who you help and who you turn away, and there's no right answer to that, just trade-offs that will haunt you if you survive. This doesn't make preparation pointless. It makes it essential but realistic. You're not preparing to guarantee survival. You're preparing to improve your odds from terrible to marginally less terrible. You're preparing to have options when most people have none. You're preparing to maintain some agency in situations designed to strip away all control. And here's what separates the 1% who think about this from the 0.1% who actually act. The 0.1% start today, not tomorrow. Not after they research more. Not after they save up money. Today. Open a new tab right now and search for your municipal water source. Map the routes from your location to that source. Identify what would make that route impassable. Then find 2 alternative water sources and map those routes. That's day 1, hour 1 of actual preparation. Calculate your household's caloric needs for 90 days. Price out the cheapest calories available: rice, beans, oats, flour, salt, oil. Determine the storage requirements. Find the space. Buy the first week's worth this month. That's month 1 of food security. Research the most likely disaster scenarios for your specific geographic location. Not generic disaster. Your location: earthquake, flood, hurricane, industrial accident, civil unrest. Then map your evacuation routes for each specific scenario because they're different. Build a physical network of 3 people minimum who you can coordinate with if communications fail. Exchange contact info for family. Establish meeting points if you can't reach each other digitally. Practice those protocols once. Just once. More than 99% of people won't. And here's the final uncomfortable truth. 99% of the people watching this video won't do any of those things. They'll nod along, feel anxious for about 20 minutes, then go back to scrolling. They'll keep thinking about preparing instead of actually preparing. They'll confuse awareness with readiness. The 1% who actually act will start small, build systematically, and understand that preparation is a process, not a destination. They'll make mistakes. They'll waste money on gear they don't need. They'll eventually figure out what actually matters versus what looks tactical in YouTube videos. And the 0.1% who take this seriously will recognize something crucial. The goal isn't to survive alone in perfect safety. The goal is to not be part of the desperate, unprepared masses who become the primary threat to everyone who did prepare. The goal is to have enough buffer that you can make rational decisions instead of desperate ones. The goal is to maintain your humanity while having the capability to defend it if necessary. You now know the 8 realistic ways civilization collapses. You now know why your current preparation level is almost certainly inadequate. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Class dismissed. Your move.